The warning in the stars. The great hall on the moon of Velethtor was older than most civilizations. Its walls were made of living crystal that sang softly when beings walked past. Light came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air smelled like flowers that had no name in any human language. Here, the elder species had gathered for 12,000 cycles to welcome new peoples into the galactic family. They had seen hundreds of young species take their first steps into the stars. Most learned quickly. Some did not survive. All were changed. Today, they would meet humanity. The human delegation arrived in ships that made the elders uncomfortable. The engines were loud and messy, burning fuel in ways that seemed almost primitive. The vessels announced themselves from half a system away, rumbling and coughing through space like sick animals. The Sithrani, beings made of pure light who had sailed the cosmos for 1,000,000 years, watched the approach with something close to pity. "They are so young," whispered Keleth, the Sithrani ambassador. His body flickered between blue and gold as he spoke. "So very, very young." The human ships landed on the crystal platform with a heavy thud. Steam hissed from their cooling systems. Hatches opened with mechanical groans. And out stepped the strangest creatures the galaxy had seen in a very long time. They were soft. They had no scales, no shell, no protective plates. Their skin was thin and easily damaged. They walked on 2 legs, which seemed inefficient. They had small eyes, dull ears, and noses that could barely smell anything at all. By every measure the elders used, humans were weak, fragile, and poorly designed for survival. Yet, here they were. They had crawled out of their mud, built cities, split atoms, and finally reached the stars. Against all odds, these soft, slow, clumsy creatures had made it. The lead human was a woman named Sarah Chun. She was not tall or strong or impressive in any physical way, but her eyes were sharp, and she looked at the great hall with a hunger that made some of the elders nervous. It was not greed in her gaze. It was curiosity. Deep, endless, almost painful curiosity. "Welcome," said Keleth, floating forward. "Welcome to the community of stars. We have watched your progress with interest. You have done well to reach this place." Sarah Chun bowed her head in respect. "Thank you. We are honored to be here. We have many questions." The elders exchanged glances. Of course they did. Young species always had questions. It was part of growing up. The ceremony began. Each elder species gave their traditional greeting. The Morthai, insect-like beings with shells of dark metal, spoke of trade and territory. The Veleth, who were cousins to the living crystals of the hall, sang of art and beauty. The Kreshel, massive warriors with forearms and fanged faces, grunted about honor and combat. Each species shared their wisdom, their history, their place in the galactic order. And then came the warnings. Every new species received the same list. Do not anger the void swimmers in the galactic core. Do not dig too deep on worlds marked with the forbidden sigil. Do not make deals with the merchants of Hollow unless you are prepared to lose something precious. But the greatest warning, the one that silenced the hall and made even the Kreshel lower their voices, was about the Veilthan, the Woodland Wraiths. Keleth's light grew dim as he spoke. In the Corax reaches, there are things that hunt. They have no bodies that we can see. They have no ships that we can track. They exist between the spaces, in the dark between stars. We call them the Veilthan. Others call them the Woodland Wraiths, for they haunt the nebulae like spirits in an ancient forest. The humans listened. Sarah Chun took notes on a small device. 17 species have been destroyed by the Wraiths, Keleth continued. Entire civilizations gone, not defeated in war. Not killed by disease. Simply erased. Ships enter the reaches. Ships do not return. This has been true for 8,000 years. An old Morthai named Voss stepped forward. His shell was cracked and scarred from centuries of life. My people once ruled an empire of 200 worlds. We were proud. We were strong. We thought we could fight anything. He paused, and his mandibles clicked with old grief. We sent our greatest fleet into the reaches to destroy the Wraiths. 40,000 ships. 2 million warriors. None returned. Not one. The hall was silent. We do not know what the Wraiths are, Kellis said. We do not know how they kill. We know only that they cannot be stopped, cannot be fought, cannot be reasoned with. The only defense is avoidance. The only wisdom is fear. He floated closer to Sarah Chun, his light flickering with urgency. Believe in the Wraiths, he said. Do not question. Do not investigate. Do not try to understand. Simply believe that they are real, that they are deadly, and that you must never enter their territory. This is how species survive. This is how you will survive. The other elders nodded. This was the way. This had always been the way. Sarah Chum looked at her notes. Then she looked at the ancient beings around her. Then she asked a question that made Calip's light flicker with confusion. What do they look like? We do not know, Caliph admitted. How do they hunt? Unknown. Are there patterns to the disappearances? Times when they are more active? Locations they prefer? These questions are not useful, Voss interrupted, his voice harsh. The Wraiths cannot be studied. They can only be believed. You must accept this. Sarah Chun was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, and it was a strange smile. It was not disrespectful. It was not arrogant. It was the smile of someone who had just been given a very interesting puzzle. Thank you for the warning, she said. We take it very seriously. We believe the Wraiths are real and dangerous. But with respect, we have some experience with predators. Our ancestors lived alongside wolves and tigers and bears. We learned that fear is useful, but understanding is better. You cannot understand the Wraiths, Kellis said. Many have tried. Perhaps, Sarah Chun replied. But we would like to try anyway. Not to fight them. Not to challenge them. Just to watch. Just to learn. The elders looked at each other with worry in their ancient eyes. They had seen this before. Young species full of confidence, certain they were special. Certain they would succeed where others had failed. They gave humanity 60 years before extinction. The humans thanked them for their hospitality, returned to their loud and clumsy ships, and flew away into the darkness. But on the journey home, Sarah Chun opened a new file on her device. She labeled it simply Wraiths, and she began taking notes. The patient observer's 50 years passed. To the elder species, this was nothing. A blink, a breath. The Sithrani had existed for 1,000,000 years. The Morthai had built and lost empires over hundreds of thousands of cycles. 50 years was barely worth noticing. But to humanity, 50 years was a generation. Children had been born, grown old, and died. Cities had risen on new worlds. Technology had advanced in ways the elders did not bother to track. And most importantly, the project had continued. Station Ouroboros floated at the edge of the Karax reaches like a patient spider at the edge of its web. It was not large or impressive. The elders who occasionally passed by thought it was a mining outpost or a fuel depot. They did not look closely. They did not want to look closely. The reaches made everyone nervous, even from a safe distance. Inside the station, Dr. Yuki Tanaka reviewed the morning data. She was the third director of the Wraith Research Initiative. The first had been Sarah Chun herself, who had worked until her death at 92. The second had been Chun's student, Marcus Webb, who had spent 40 years collecting and organizing information. Now, it was Tanaka's turn to carry the torch. The walls of her office were covered with charts and maps and graphs. Red dots marked every known disappearance in the reaches going back 8,000 years. The elders had kept records, even if they refused to study them. Tanaka had gathered everything she could find, begged and traded for access to ancient databases, and slowly built the most complete picture of Wraith activity in galactic history, and she had found patterns. The Wraiths are more active during stellar alignments, she told her team. During the morning meeting, when the 3 pulsars in the region sync their rotations, disappearances increase by 40%. When the pulsars are out of sync, activity drops. Her assistant, a young man named Kenji, pulled up another chart. We also noticed that larger ships disappear more often than smaller ones. The average mass of lost vessels is 3 times higher than the average mass of ships that pass through safely. And there is something else, Tanaka added. Ships that go silent before entering the reaches have a higher survival rate. Not by much, but it is there in the data. If a ship powers down its active systems and drifts quietly, it is less likely to vanish. The team discussed the findings. They argued about what the patterns meant. They proposed new experiments. This was how humans worked. They did not accept mysteries. They picked at them, poked at them, refused to let them rest. Tanaka had spent her entire career on this project. She had never married, never had children. The Wraiths were her life. Not because she wanted to destroy them or conquer them. She simply wanted to understand. It was a hunger that had driven her species since the first human had looked at the stars and wondered what they were. A few weeks later, Ambassador Keleth of the Sithrani came to visit. He was old now, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His light had dimmed over the centuries, turning from bright gold to soft amber. He had watched humanity since their first arrival in the galactic community, and he had grown concerned. "You should not be here," he told Tanaka as she showed him around the station. "This place is too close to the reaches. You are in danger." "We are careful," Tanaka replied. "We do not enter the reaches. We only watch. Watching is dangerous. The Wraiths do not like to be watched." Tanaka smiled gently. "With respect, Ambassador, how do you know what the Wraiths like? You told us yourself that no one understands them." Keleth flickered with frustration. "That is exactly my point. You cannot study what you cannot understand. You should simply believe in the danger and stay away." They walked past a wall of screens showing probe data. Tiny machines drifted through the edge of the nebula, recording everything they could before going silent. Each lost probe was a small tragedy and a small victory. Tragedy because the machine was gone. Victory because it had sent back data before it died. "Our ancestors faced predators too," Tanaka said. "Wolves, tigers, bears. Animals that could kill a human easily. Do you know how our ancestors survived? By running away?" Keleth guessed. "Sometimes, but mostly by watching. They would follow wolf packs for days, learning how they hunted, where they slept, what made them angry. They learned that wolves attacked from behind, so humans walked in groups with eyes in all directions. They learned that wolves were afraid of fire, so humans carried torches. They learned and learned and learned until the wolves were no longer monsters. They were just animals. Dangerous animals, but animals that could be understood." Keleth's light pulsed with discomfort. "The Wraiths are not wolves." "No," Tanaka agreed. "They are something else. Something stranger. But they are still part of the universe. They follow rules, even if we do not know what those rules are yet. And if they follow rules, they can be understood. You will die trying. Some of us have died. Probe operators who took risks. Scout pilots who flew too close. researchers who pushed too hard. We honor their memory by continuing their work. She led him to the memorial wall. Dozens of names were carved into the metal, each one a person who had given their life for the project. Keleth read the names in silence. He did not understand humans. He had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and he still did not understand them. "Why do you do this?" he asked finally. "Why risk so much for knowledge about creatures you will never meet?" Tanaka thought about the question. It was a good question. She had asked herself the same thing many times. "Because not knowing is worse," she said. "My species cannot live with mysteries. We have to pick at them until they make sense. It is not always smart. It is not always safe. But it is who we are. We would rather die learning than live in ignorance." Keleth left the station that day convinced that humanity would be the 18th extinction. They were too curious, too stubborn, too unwilling to accept the limits of the universe. The Wraiths would destroy them, just as they had destroyed so many others. But as his ship flew away, Tanaka returned to her office and opened the morning data. A new pattern had emerged. The Wraiths seemed to avoid certain frequencies of radiation. It was a small discovery, perhaps meaningless, perhaps not. She added it to the file and kept working. The wolves were out there in the darkness, and humanity was learning to read their tracks. The quiet Snares another 30 years passed. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had grown old and retired, passing her work to the next generation. The Wraith Research Initiative had grown from a small station to a network of observation posts surrounding the Corax reaches. Thousands of humans had dedicated their lives to the project. Millions of data points had been collected, analyzed, and studied. And finally, humanity was ready to act. Commander James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Quiet Hunter, flagship of the first expedition into Wraith territory. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Every member of his crew had trained for a decade. Every system on his 12 ships had been designed with one purpose in mind. They were going to catch a Wraith. "Final systems check," Okonkwo said. His voice was soft. Everything about this mission would be soft. Soft voices. Soft movements. Soft signals. The Wraiths hunted energy and noise. The humans would give them neither. "Engines at minimum power," reported his pilot. "We will drift on momentum only." "Communications locked to tight beam lasers," said the signals officer. "No radio, no broadcast, no active emissions. Life support running on passive recycling," added the environmental officer. "Each signature is barely above background radiation." The 12 ships hung in space like dead things. Their engines were cold. Their lights were dim. They did not speak to each other except through invisible beams of light that could not be detected from more than a few kilometers away. To any observer, they would look like debris. Space junk. Nothing worth noticing. This was the first lesson humanity had learned. The Wraiths hunted noise. They were drawn to energy signatures, like sharks were drawn to blood. Active engines, powerful sensors, strong communications. These were dinner bells ringing in the dark. Ships that burned bright died fast, but ships that went quiet survived. Okonkwo gave the order, and the fleet began its drift into the Corax reaches. The nebula surrounded them slowly, like fog rolling through a valley. Clouds of gas and dust in colors that had no names blocked their view of the stars. The light of distant suns filtered through the haze, creating shadows that moved and shifted in unsettling ways. It was beautiful and terrifying. For 3 days, they drifted in silence. The crew spoke in whispers. They moved carefully, avoiding any sudden action that might create vibration. They ate cold food and drank recycled water. They slept in shifts, always keeping watch. always listening. On the fourth day, the Wraiths came. The sensors detected them first strange ripples in subspace, like something large moving just beneath the surface of reality. Then the visual feeds caught glimpses of them. They were vast and gossamer, shapes made of light and shadow that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process. They flickered in and out of visibility, here and then not here, solid and then transparent. They were hunting. The crew of the Quiet Hunter held their breath. Every training exercise had led to this moment. Every simulation, every drill, every long night studying the data. They knew what to do. They knew how to survive. Do not move. Do not react. Do not give them anything to chase. The Wraiths circled the fleet like wolves circling a campfire. They could sense something was there, but they could not find it. The ships were too quiet, too cold, too still. The Wraiths searched and searched, their ghostly forms passing within meters of the hulls. But they found nothing to hunt. After 6 hours, they drifted away into the deeper nebula. Okonkwo released a breath he had been holding for what felt like years. "Phase 1 complete," he whispered. "Prepare the snares." The snares were humanity's second lesson made real. The Wraiths hunted energy. They could not resist certain signatures, and they could be led, like any predator, into traps. The crew deployed 20 drones, each one programmed to broadcast the energy signature of a wounded capital ship. Bright, loud, impossible to ignore. The drones scattered into the nebula, trailing temptation behind them like fishing lures. Then the humans waited. It did not take long. The Wraiths returned, drawn by the irresistible call of prey. They fell upon the drones with terrible speed, their forms wrapping around the small machines like nets catching fish. But the drones did not stop. They kept moving, leading the Wraiths deeper into the nebula, toward regions where gravity was strange and subspace was unstable. The Wraiths grew confused. The drones led them in circles, through gravitational eddies that disrupted their movement, through radiation fields that seemed to blind them. The great hunters of the reaches stumbled and slowed, tangled in a maze they did not understand. And then the containment teams moved in, 3 small ships, each carrying experimental subspace field generators, approached the confused Wraiths. The generators activated, creating bubbles of altered reality that trapped the creatures like insects in amber. The Wraiths struggled, their forms flickering wildly, but they could not escape. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Woodland Wraiths had been caught. Okonkwo watched as the containment fields were towed carefully back to the fleet. 3 juvenile Wraiths, each one a mystery that had haunted the galaxy for millennia, now floated helplessly in human custody. "We did it," whispered his pilot, her voice shaking with emotion. "We actually did it." "Not yet," Okonkwo replied. "We still have to get them home." The journey out of the reaches took 2 weeks. They moved slowly, carefully, never letting their guard down. More Wraiths came to investigate, but the fleet remained quiet and cold, and the predators passed them by. When they finally emerged into open space, the crew allowed themselves to celebrate. They had entered the territory that had killed 17 civilizations. They had captured creatures that no species had ever captured before, and they had not lost a single ship. The message they sent to Earth was simple: mission successful. The wolves can be caught. The elder species received the news in stunned silence. The Sithrani flickered with disbelief. The Morthai clicked their mandibles in confusion. The Kreshel demanded proof, certain it was a trick, but it was not a trick. Humanity had done what the galaxy said could not be done. They had studied the trails, laid quiet snares, and caught the monsters in the dark. The Wraiths were no longer unknowable. They were just animals, dangerous. Beautiful, magnificent animals. And humanity had learned how to live beside them. The heresy of understanding The conclave of elder species had not gathered in emergency session for 3,000 years. The last time had been when the Kreshel threatened war against the Veleth over a mining dispute. Before then, it had been when a rogue artificial intelligence had escaped from a research facility and had to be hunted across 6 systems. Now they gathered because of humanity. The Great Hall on Veleth Tor was full. Every elder species had sent representatives. Some had sent their highest leaders. The crystals in the walls sang with tension, picking up the emotions of the beings inside and reflecting them back as sound. The noise was like a storm building in the distance. High Arbiter Voss of the Morthai stood at the center of the hall. His carapace was polished to a shine, and his eyes burned with cold anger. He was one of the oldest living Morthai, old enough to remember when his people had sent their fleet into the Reaches. Old enough to remember waiting for news that never came. Old enough to carry 8,000 years of grief and shame. The humans have committed heresy, he declared. His voice echoed through the chamber, silencing all other sound. They have captured the sacred terrors. They have violated the ancient wisdom. They have shown contempt for everything we have learned over millennia of suffering. The Sithrani ambassador, a young being named Lyris, who had replaced the ancient Keleth, flickered with discomfort. The humans claim they meant no disrespect. They say they were only trying to protect themselves. Lies. Voss clicked his mandibles sharply. They were trying to prove they are better than us. They think their youth gives them special wisdom. They think our caution is cowardice. A murmur ran through the hall. Many of the elder species agreed with Voss. The humans were arrogant. They were reckless. They had ignored 12,000 years of accumulated knowledge and stumbled into dangers they did not understand. But others were not so sure. The Veleth, who valued knowledge above all else, were curious about what humanity had learned. A faction of younger Kreshel, tired of their species' endless wars, wondered if there might be a better way to face threats. Even some of the Sithrani, who had warned humanity so strongly at their first meeting, felt stirrings of something like hope. Into this divided assembly came the human delegation. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was too old to travel anymore. She watched the proceedings through a holographic connection from Station Ouroboros. Her image flickered in the center of the hall, a small human woman surrounded by giants and ancients. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "I know many of you are angry. I understand why. The Wraiths have caused you great pain for a very long time." "You understand nothing," Voss interrupted. "You are children playing with fire." Tanaka did not argue. She simply nodded. "Perhaps. My species is very young. We have made many mistakes. We will probably make many more. But we have also learned some things that we would like to share." She activated a display, filling the air with data and images. The elder species watched as she walked them through a century of research. The patterns of Wraith behavior, the triggers that attracted them, the frequencies that confused them, the gravitational conditions that trapped them. "The Veleth are not supernatural," Tanaka explained. "They are a form of life that exists partially in subspace. They are drawn to certain energy signatures because those signatures resemble their natural prey, creatures that lived in the nebula millions of years ago and have long since gone extinct. When the Wraiths attack ships, they are not being malicious. They are simply hungry and confused." She showed them the 3 captured juveniles, now housed in a special facility where they were studied and cared for. The creatures floated in their containment fields, their gossamer forms rippling with strange colors. They were beautiful in a way that was hard to describe. "We do not want to destroy the Wraiths," Tanaka said. "We want to understand them. And we want to share that understanding with all of you." She presented everything freely. The behavioral data, the containment methods, the safe passage protocols. Any species that wanted to cross the Corax reaches could now do so without fear, as long as they followed the guidelines humanity had developed. The garden worlds the Velith abandoned can be reclaimed, Tanaka said. The trade routes that have been closed for millennia can reopen. The fear that has shaped your civilizations for 8,000 years can finally end. The hall was silent. The crystals had stopped singing. Every being present was processing what they had just heard. Voss was the first to speak. You think you are heroes. You think you have saved us. But you have not. You have destroyed something precious. Tanaka looked at him with gentle eyes. What have we destroyed? The mystery. The sacred terror. The wraiths were beyond understanding. That was their power. That was their meaning. They reminded us that the universe is vast and strange, and not meant to be conquered. You have taken that away. You have made the unknowable known. For a moment, Tanaka was quiet. When she spoke, her voice was sad but firm. I understand why you feel that way, but I must respectfully disagree. Understanding does not destroy wonder. It creates new wonder. Before we studied the wraiths, they were simply monsters. Now we know they are creatures with behaviors and needs and a place in the ecosystem of the nebula. Is that not more wondrous than blind fear? She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Our ancestors faced many things they did not understand. Lightning, disease, the movement of the stars. They could have worshipped these things as sacred mysteries beyond comprehension. Some did, but others asked questions. They studied and learned and slowly built understanding. And with understanding came the power to protect themselves and improve their lives. Lyris of the Sithrani spoke up. You could have died. Your entire species could have been destroyed, like so many before you. Yes, Tanaka admitted. Many of us did die. We honor their sacrifice. But we believe their deaths had meaning because they added to our knowledge. They died reaching for understanding, not running from fear. The debate continued for hours. Voss remained opposed, insisting that humanity had committed an unforgivable transgression against the natural order. But others began to see things differently. A young Velith named Crystallis asked if humanity would share their research methods. A Kreshal warrior named Thorak wondered if similar techniques could be used to study other dangers in the galaxy. Even some of the Morthai, Voss's own people, began whispering that perhaps it was time to let go of old grief and embrace new possibilities. By the end of the session, no official decision had been made. The elder species were too divided, too confused, too shaken by what they had witnessed. But something had changed. A door had opened that could not be closed. As Tanaka's hologram faded, she left them with one final thought. We do not ask you to abandon your beliefs. We only ask you to consider that understanding and reverence are not opposites. We can study the wraiths and still respect them. We can know them and still find them wonderful. Perhaps that is the lesson our ancestors learned long ago, that the world becomes more beautiful when you understand how it works. Not less. The crystals in the walls began to sing again, but the tune had changed. It was no longer the sound of a storm building. It was the sound of something new being born. The flourishing 850 years had passed as humanity first arrived at the conclave of elder species. In galactic terms, this was still nothing. A moment, a heartbeat. But in that moment, everything had changed. The Corax reaches were no longer a graveyard, where once only silence and death had ruled. Now, there was life and activity. Ships passed through the nebula regularly, following safe corridors that humanity had mapped and marked. The ancient trade routes had reopened, connecting distant parts of the galaxy that had been separated for millennia. Goods and ideas and people flowed through the reaches, like blood through veins that had long been blocked, and the wraiths still hunted there, as they always had. But they were no longer monsters. They were neighbors. Ranger Station 7 floated in the heart of the nebula, a joint operation between humans and Valeth. Inside, teams of researchers monitored wraith populations, tracked migration patterns, and ensured that passing ships did not disturb the creatures' breeding grounds. It was delicate work, requiring patience and respect. The wraiths were still dangerous. Any animal could be dangerous if surprised or threatened. But they were no longer unknowable. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, granddaughter of the legendary Commander James Okonkwo, led the station's research team. She had grown up hearing stories of her grandfather's expedition, the first humans to enter the reaches and return alive. Now she continued his work, not as a hunter, but as a guardian. "We have 3 juveniles approaching Sector 9, reported her assistant, a young Valeth named Shimmer. "They seem to be feeding on the radiation from the pulsar cluster." Amara nodded. "Route commercial traffic around that area for the next few days. Let them eat in peace." This was the new way. Humans had not conquered the wraiths. They had learned to live alongside them. The creatures were magnificent, strange, beautiful in ways that still took Amara's breath away after years of study. She felt no desire to control or dominate them. She only wanted to understand and protect. Far across the galaxy, on the crystal moon of Velith Tor, the conclave was gathering for its annual session. But this year was special. This year marked the 150th anniversary of humanity's admission to the galactic community. And this year, a human would address the full assembly for the first time since the great debate over the wraiths. Ambassador Chen Wei was the 3rd generation of her family to serve in diplomatic roles. Her grandmother had been part of the original delegation that received the warning about the wraiths. Her mother had helped negotiate the first joint research agreements. Now Chen Wei carried the torch forward, representing humanity to the stars. She stood at the center of the great hall, surrounded by beings of light and crystal and metal and flesh. The singing walls were quiet, waiting for her to speak. 150 years ago, she began, my ancestors came to this place as strangers. You welcomed us with kindness. You warned us of the dangers we would face. And you gave us the most important piece of advice any young species can receive. Believe in the Woodland Wraiths. She paused, letting her words settle. We did believe. We still believe. The Wraiths are real. They are powerful. They demand respect. But our ancestors taught us that belief and understanding are not enemies. We can believe in something and still seek to know it better. We can respect something and still ask questions about how it works. The elders listened. Even old Voss of the Morthai, now ancient beyond measure and rarely seen in public, had come to hear what the human would say. When we studied the wraiths, Chen Wei continued, we were not being arrogant. We were being humble. We knew that we did not understand, so we watched. We listened. We learned. We made mistakes. We lost people we loved. But we kept going, because that is what our species does. We cannot help ourselves. We have to know. She smiled, and there was warmth in it. And in knowing, we found something unexpected. We found not conquest, but kinship. The wraiths are not so different from us. They hunt because they must eat. They migrate because they must breed. They protect their young because they must survive. They are part of the great tapestry of life in this universe, just as we are. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of each delegation in turn. Our ancestors did not defeat the wolves by being stronger or faster. They defeated the wolves by being patient, by watching tracks in the snow, by learning the paths the wolves followed and the prey they hunted. And in time, the wolves stopped being enemies and became companions. Dogs, we call them now. Partners. Friends. A ripple of something passed through the hall. Not quite agreement. Not quite understanding. But curiosity. Interest. The beginning of change. The wraiths will never be our pets, Chanwei said. They are too wild, too alien, too different from us. But they do not have to be our destroyers either. We have shown that it is possible to share space with them, to study them without harming them, to protect them while protecting ourselves. She straightened her shoulders. We offer this knowledge freely to all of you, not as a gift from a superior species, because we are not superior. We are young and foolish, and we have much to learn from your ancient wisdom. But we offer what we have discovered because we believe that knowledge should be shared, because we believe that no species should have to fear the darkness alone. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Veleth began to chime their way of showing approval. The sound was soft at first, then louder, spreading through their delegation like light spreading at dawn. Then the younger Kreshel joined in, clashing their arm plates together in their traditional gesture of respect. The Sifrani flickered brighter, their light pulsing in harmony with the chiming. Even some of the Morthai clicked their mandibles in grudging acknowledgement. Old Voss remained still. His eyes were fixed on Chen Wei, and she could not read the expression on his ancient face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he rose from his seat. The hall fell silent again. Everyone knew what Voss represented. He was the last living link to the fleet that had been destroyed in the Reaches. He carried 8,000 years of grief and anger and fear. "I have hated you," he said, his voice cracked and rough. "I have called you heretics and fools. I have wished for your destruction." Chen Wei did not flinch. She met his gaze steadily. "But I am old," Voss continued. "I am tired of carrying this weight. Perhaps it is time to set it down." He made a gesture that Chen Wei did not recognize. Later, she would learn that it was an ancient Morthai sign of peace, not used in thousands of years. "Teach us," Voss said. "Teach us to see the wraiths as you see them. Teach us to understand instead of fear. Perhaps it is too late for me, but perhaps it is not too late for those who come after." The hall erupted in sound. The crystals sang. The delegates spoke over each other, some in shock, some in joy, some still in anger. But the moment had passed. The door had opened. Chen Wei bowed her head in respect. "We will teach what we know, and we will learn what you know. Together, we are stronger than any of us alone." In the years that followed, humanity became something new in the galaxy. Not conquerors, not rulers, teachers, bridges, translators between the old wisdom of fear and the new wisdom of understanding. They helped the Veleth reclaim their lost garden worlds. They taught the Kreshel to study their enemies before fighting them. They worked with the Morthai to build a memorial for the fleet that had been lost, not as a symbol of defeat, but as a reminder of the courage of those who had tried to face the unknown. And in the Korax Reaches, the wraiths still swam through the clouds of gas and light. They still hunted. They were still dangerous. But they were no longer the end of civilizations. They were simply part of the universe. Strange and beautiful and worthy of respect. Humanity had not conquered the stars. They had done something harder. They had learned to listen to them. And in listening, they had finally found their place among the ancients. The wolves were out there, as they had always been. But humanity had learned their songs. And the songs were no longer terrifying. They were just another voice in the great chorus of life.